is. Nobody else is responsible for the atmosphere in your home. And remember, the atmosphere in your home teaches your kids what is important, what is of value in life. So you have to manage that, because if you don't manage that, if you get stressed out at the wrong time. We did a survey at Redfield of the students in secondary, and we invited them to talk about what were the best moments to communicate with mum, best moments to communicate with dad, and so on. And we reported back on this to the parents. And up until about 13 or 14 years of age, the students blamed themselves if mum or dad were stressed or cranky. But after that, they blamed their parents for not having self-control. They see through it. And of course, you know, what we end up doing is putting a barrier between ourselves and the children. And then they don't communicate. They don't tell us what's going on in their lives. I had dinner the other night with a couple who were stressed out terribly about their son, who this year, because he's working down at Macca's, he's got in with people, they've all got piercings now, comes home with piercings, he's going into year 12. All he does is go to his room and grunt. That's all he does. I'm literally saying the truth. And they're worried sick about him. And they don't know how to break the impasse. What's your ultimate goal? Your ultimate goal is to help your son or daughter value the truth and be able to love well. And let's not accept substitutes, because if they don't learn to give of themselves in love, in relationships with other people and in love of God, if they don't learn that, they will be certainly dissatisfied with their own lives, but they will probably do some damage to others in the process. So we've got to think big. It's a beautiful goal, but we are the example. Pope John Paul talked about how from the love that parents have for each other and for their children, children learn of God's love. So it's a beautiful mission that you have. And remember, when you have a mission to do, God's better than the best employer. If Angus employs someone, he's got to give them, he does give them, all of the help they need to do their job. If he doesn't, he would be a bad employer. If you have people that work for you, it's the same. Well, God's better than the best employer. If he gives you a job to do to raise your kids well, he's going to give you the complete wherewithal. But we have to ask him, we have to pray, and we'll get to that. But it's a big issue. And it's a marvellous mission you have. There's no more important mission in this world, is there, than to bring people with you to heaven and to help people do a great deal of good in their lives. So let's talk first of all about managing inputs coming in. We talked about getting the weight on the end of the seesaw, and there's a lot of weight to be got on the end of the seesaw because there's a lot of other influences, aren't there? This idea of imitation is very real, that children are wired to imitate. That's the way they learn. Watch this. Look what Homer says. We become like the company we keep. The people we hang around with will end up influencing us. I think you'll watch this. Whoa. No, I'm coming back. I've got another little video I want to show you. I'm sorry, I'm coming to it. Aristotle comes up with this beautiful idea that we like best whatever we first experience. So your job as a parent is to make sure that your child's first experiences, the first things that they imitate, are very positive. Look what Plato has to say about the example that kids get. Both Plato and Aristotle talk very strongly about we've got to be very careful about taking children to the theatre, because at times the theatre in Greek society was very bawdy and borderline. What would Aristotle have to say about the internet? What would he have to say about late night television or MTV late at night? You know, I had dinner last night with some friends in an Indian restaurant. It's a beautiful Indian restaurant. They're playing Indian MTV, and Indian MTV is now sort of pretty gross rap. You know, I mean, what's going on? Why do we put up with this? You know? Sorry, not rap, but the images were pretty gross. Let's look at a number of inputs. Father and son. Oh, by the way, I have an abseiling story. We often used to have father-son camps at the schools where I've been at, and we came in that evening to dinner on the Saturday night, and I said to one of the boys, "Hey, how was the abseiling? Did you enjoy it?" "Yeah, it was really good." "Did Dad enjoy it?" And the boy just looked at me and said, "Dad's always got an excuse." So, if you're in a position to be very united with your spouse, really take it all the way. Of course, it's possible to raise a child on your own beautifully, but it's harder than it is meant to be in a sense. So certainly don't be discouraged, but there are many couples out there raising kids who are not united. Big issue. I'm not sitting in judgment, that's not where I'm coming from, but if you are with your spouse, be united. Talk every day about your kids. It's your life project. It would be a great shame to talk sort of once every fortnight about something that goes wrong instead of talking every day about your kids. Nothing's more important. That's your job. There's a lot of very nice material on this. Homer, in the Odyssey, I think it is, so we're talking about 2,800 years ago, he says that there's nothing better in this world than that husband and wife should be of one mind. So this is not some invention of the Catholic Church. This is timeless wisdom. Ray Guarendi is a great writer from the States, psychologist. He's done a number of really good books and on marriage and on family. And one approach he took for one of his books, he interviewed the teachers of the year across all the states. And then he asked those teachers in interview, who are the best families you've ever come across that have impressed you the most? And then he went and interviewed the families. So he distilled all this advice into the book. And his advice is the best thing that a husband can do for his children is to love their mother. The best thing you can do. Habits of affection. What about this true story? This comes from the guy who's running Redfield now. He wouldn't mind me repeating this. He's got a family of, I think, 10 kids. And one of his younger kids came downstairs having been given a timeout. Of course, one of the disadvantages of having a larger family is sometimes the little guys copy the older guys. And he'd used some very choice language beginning with F, and he's 4 years old. So he'd been given a timeout. And finally comes down from his timeout. He says to his mum, I don't want to live in this family anymore because I can't say F whenever I want to. Mum just continues doing the potatoes. And she says, oh mate, where are you going to live? He says, it's okay, you guys are going to have to move out. True story, true story. So she says, what are you going to eat? I'll take a banana from the bowl. So she's used reasons, right? Reasons don't cut it. So then she plays her ace and she says, mate, who's going to give you cuddles? And he goes all sort of Charlie Brown wrinkly. He says, I think I made a mistake. Isn't that great? So affection always wins. You have to be masters at affection. You need reasons, but you need to be masters of affection. Barbara Holborough, wonderful, feisty lady she's now passed away, but she was the most well-known children's court magistrate in New South Wales. She said that too many of the young people who came before her in the children's court lacked affection. Don Edgar used to run when the family court was set up, he was set up to head it. He was heading an institution associated with that, but I heard him talking on one occasion at a conference and he just came up with this gem. He said, all good parenting advice comes down to one simple graph. And everybody's ears sort of opened up. And we want this. And he said, you've got to be high on affection and high on expectations. You've got to be very clear about your expectations, and you've got to be very high on affection. If you're high on affection with no expectations, your kids will be marshmallows. If you're high on demands and there's no affection, you drive your kids away. Good advice, isn't it? High on affection, very clear, challenging expectations. Kids, rise to our expectations. St. Josemaria said, demand through affection. Don't demand crankily, don't demand firmly, demand with affection. And you'll get what you want. So that's that issue of high but reasonable expectations. We had Father Chris Riley, famous for, youth on the streets, youth off the streets, come and talk at Redfield. and it was a group of parents and senior students, and he just said to the parents, you know, point blank between the eyes, have the courage to demand greatness from the children in your care. So be demanding, but do it with affection. And obviously, if you raise kids in an atmosphere where we keep challenging them positively. I'll give you an example. The last school I've been at has some Croatian families, and some of those Croatian families have marvellously strong faith. I suppose because they've been through the mill, etc., back home. And I was talking to one of the boys about the fact that they say the rosary at home. I knew they said the rosary at home, and I knew Mum worked shifts. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty good effort. How does Dad organise that? And Dad comes home, he's a tradie. He comes home, and then the kids he sorts out the kids, have dinner, and then the boy in year 10 told me, and Dad says, would you like to say the rosary? But he says it in such a way, and it's so encouraging that we always say it. Isn't that nice? But knowing how to encourage and put kids in a space where they want to come with you is obviously a blessing, but you don't get very far compelling teenagers. You've got to have a better strategy than that. What about example? Another one of my friends teaching with me, his little boy came up to him and said, Dad, I know what you like. And Dad sort of puffs his chest out. He thinks the boy's going to say, you don't love your family or something. He says, Dad, you like to watch the cricket and drink beer. That was what the boy's taken home, right? Isn't it interesting? We don't sometimes know what example is doing in the guys' minds. Excuse me a sec.